Yeah, gotta aim for the top like, hold up. Yeah, I can never doubt myself, I know better. All of you critics be acting like you know better. Blowing the smoke, but I know when the dust settles. That I'm in my element, it's evident that there's levels to the game.
So what's happening, people? Today, I am sitting down with a man that has a great resume, somebody that I look up to in the business. It is Mr. Steve Wyche, the current NFL Network Chief National Reporter. Steve, I really appreciate you taking some time to jump on. So welcome and thank you for coming on.
Well, Ryan, thanks for inviting me. That's the important part. I'm humbled by that, and I'm looking forward to this.
Yeah, so I want to start out with the same way I start out with everybody else, and it's kind of what's your sports why? You know, something that I saw you said to Andre Johnson recently was you start playing football as something to do or because you love it. And I wanted to kind of flip that question on you. You know, what made you jump into sports, or maybe who made you jump into sports as a young athlete?
You know, it's so different, from, like you said, the young athlete to now, because my mission has changed. When I was young, I wanted to be a pro athlete. And, the athlete I most admired, there were two, was Chuck Foreman, number 44, the running back for the Minnesota Vikings. I grew up as a young kid in Minneapolis, and had he not had a short career, I'm sure he would have been a Pro Football Hall of Famer. And then Walter Payton. I mean, these were two great players I aspired to be like. And then, of course, in basketball, Dr. J. And in baseball, I was, a huge St. Louis Cardinals fan, Ozzie Smith and guys like that. So I wanted to be an athlete, but I also wanted to be a broadcaster because, after Minneapolis, my family moved to St. Louis. My father worked for the local NBC affiliate in the sales department, but I was always around it. So, I wanted to be Jack Buck, Joe Buck's dad, who used to call Cardinals games, and Brian Gumbel, because he was the first black sportscaster that I saw back when he was doing like NBC Real Sports and things like that. So that was kind of it. But now, now that I'm in my, I'm definitely more sage with all the gray hair and doing TV, my sports why is to educate the fans. I mean, the fans are the lifeblood, no matter what people say about ownership and money and networks. The fans are the lifeblood of all levels of sports. And so it's to educate and inform the fans through my medium, which is television, about what's going on, to put some perspective on it, and to also do a little bit of entertaining in the process.
Yeah. So you ended up going on and playing college football at Missouri, but then you got your BA in journalism from Howard.
Yeah.
How did that come about? And once you got your BA and became a journalist, what was that epiphany that you belonged in that journalism community?
Wow. So, coming out of high school, I was a football recruit. I was a quarterback my whole life until my senior year, to the halfway through my junior year, I should say, when I got moved to defensive end / outside linebacker. And it turned out to be my natural position. I was really good as a quarterback, but wow, I had no idea what I was doing. I never played on the defensive front before in my life, and it turned out to be exactly where I needed to be to go play on the next level.
So you were Micah Parsons before Micah Parsons, is that what you're saying?
I was maybe Micah Parsons' left shoe or something. Yeah, not hardly at that level. But I ended up going to University of Missouri. Was not very good. The coaching staff, I was just too small. I came out of high school like 205, 210 pounds. I was big in high school. So I had that redshirt year where I finally got to the size. But the coaching staff got fired after my redshirt year. New staff came in, and I just wasn't, I didn't meet the specs for what the new staff wanted. Mm-hmm. So I was able to transfer out. Transfer rules were far different back then. Like I went to Howard University. I grew up in the suburbs, right? I never grew up around people who looked like me. And it was just kind of like, maybe let me go to an HBCU and get that experience. So I applied to Hampton and Howard. Both my parents are Hampton graduates. But the football coach at Howard, a guy named Willie Jeffries, he knew of me. He had recruited me when he was at Wichita State. So I was going to go there to play football. But I would have had to sit out like that whole spring because I didn't have enough credits to transfer into Howard. So I had to sit out the whole spring at University of Missouri and then not play for another year. So by the time I got to D.C., it was like, you know what, let me focus on academics. I got into the journalism school, quickly became a sports reporter for one of the student papers there. There were two. And then next was a sports editor, then the editor-in-chief. And in my final year there, I was at the Washington Post covering high school sports for about, every Friday night or whenever they need someone to cover a high school basketball game, just part-time, 20 hours. So I'm in the same newsroom as Tony Kornheiser and Michael Wilbon and Ken Denlinger and Sally Jenkins, all these great, sports legends. And some great editors who helped me get my first job in Richmond, Virginia as a writer. I was a writer for 20-some years. And, it wasn't there that I felt like I belonged, even though I covered high schools and some smaller colleges, Virginia Union, William and Mary. So when I went to Miami after that, and it took me a couple years to kind of get my legs, but then, I started covering pro boxing. Mike Tyson, Roberto Duran, like all these legends, Riddick Bowe, guys like that. And that's where I found my groove. That's where I could write with authority, where I felt like, okay, I knew these guys. They told great stories, so I could tell great stories about them. To beat people up and to get beat up for a living, you got a great story to tell as a boxer. So that's where I really found my legs. So when I was able to go cover the Dolphins, I felt good about doing that. And the Miami Heat felt good about doing that. And just kind of growing as a human being, becoming a father, becoming a husband, also helped with the maturity overall that translated into work.
Yeah. So you mentioned a couple of heavy hitters, Tony Kornheisers that were in the newsroom with you. And those were some of the guys that, along with your father, who you said was part of the community as well, that kind of opened doors for you, right? They kind of showed you the ropes, but now you're that guy that is doing that. And you are co-founder of Black Sports Business Symposium, which I've been to 2 years. As I told you before coming on here, I wasn't able to go this year, but I've gotten great connections from being there. I think we had a brief, maybe 10-second conversation when I was there, but I also met Keisha J. Kelly, somebody who's our mutual friend that got us connected as well. But now, like I said, you're opening those doors and being the founder, working with Kevin, and with Gregory Gibson to create this. How did that come about, and where did that idea come from to create this symposium for people that looked like you, that maybe didn't have these doors opening for them as they were coming through college, or that were on that professional ranks like myself?
Well, I'm glad you brought that up. Because first off, what Michael Wilbon and David Aldridge and Tony Kornheiser and so many of those people did for me, you realize nobody gets to where they are by themselves. It's a cliche, but it's true. So it was around during the pandemic when Kevin Demoff, who is the CEO of the Los Angeles Rams, said to me that every year he speaks at a sports summit up at Massachusetts Institute of Technology at MIT, but the students had to pay $1,500, like some exorbitant amount. I may be wrong with the amount, but some exorbitant amount that automatically excluded a bunch of people. And so he said, we have to find a way to maybe do a job fair or a career weekend or something for students from HBCUs or maybe students of color from around the country. So we brainstormed. We said, look, if we do something like this, let's do it in Atlanta. It's easy to get to. It's kind of in the hub of where most of the black colleges are. And it's a great city. But neither one of us would have the time to do it. He's running the Los Angeles Rams. He's putting together, SoFi Stadium and a bunch of other things that he does. And I'm busy as hell. That's covering the NFL year round. So we brought in Greg Gibson, who really does all the work. Kevin and I are listed as co-founders, but Greg does all the work. Him and his team, which is just amazing. They're based in Austin, Texas. They do him. He does a lot of things. The Battle of the Brains, a lot of things. Just fantastic stuff. So Greg is really the champion in all this. But we ended up, I called up the Falcons saying, hey, do you have a couple conference rooms at the stadium we could use for this project? And they were so enamored with it. They said, you can have the whole stadium. Arthur Blank will sponsor 100 students to come. That's a big amount of money. Hundreds of thousands of dollars. Fly people there, house them for 2 or 3 days, feed them. So, it's just been this fantastic growth. And then ESPN started out as a sponsor, so they had a bunch of people, Jamel Hill and a bunch of people that they could bring that were recognizable. We had Deion Sanders as a keynote speaker there the first year when he was still at Jackson State before he left to go to Colorado. So we had some big hitters come in initially to get the vibe going, and it was so positive, a lot of other people now want to be involved, which is why you have great speakers like Rich Paul come in, Sandra Douglas Morgan, the president of the REID'S, come in, David Mulugeta, like Rich Paul, one of the elite agents in the game, and the people from a million different walks of sports. NASCAR is big into this. Horse racing is big into this. Hockey, golf. So many of the things that teach people, like you don't have to work for a sports team or a network or something. You could go work for Titleist, which makes golf balls. You can become an agent. You can become a lawyer. You can get into sports management. So our main thing once we started this was to create a mind-opening experience to let people know there are a million jobs in the sports industry that don't have anything to do with shooting a ball or kicking a ball or hitting a ball. And it's really been fantastic that way. And the fact that so many people from so many different realms of sports take part in it, I think has helped a lot of the college students and the young professionals who get involved look at being in the business of sport in a lot of different ways.
Yeah. Yeah, I loved seeing, all the pictures and the awards and things that come out of it. And, I noticed that Jason Wright was there. I actually used to work for Sports Business Journal, and Jason and I had a conversation last year because I actually flew straight from the symposium straight to a Sports Business Journal event that was in California, and Jason was there, and him and I had talked about it, and he said, I haven't been there yet. He said, I hope to get there next year. So it was awesome to see him get there this year. And, seeing somebody that has that sort of impact on a major sports franchise is incredible. And you just said, you've had people from NASCAR and Deion Sanders being there. I grew up a Falcons fan because of Deion, and wanting to, and being there and able to hear him was tremendous for me. What are some of those success stories that you've heard come out of the symposium just already with it being just 3 short years?
Yeah, and probably the biggest thing that I forgot to talk about is there's a job fair, right, where a lot of companies come down and offer jobs and internships to people. That happens in droves. There's a young man I'll never forget named Chauncey Deion Sanders. Mm-hmm. And when Deion was the main speaker, he raised his hand and said, "My name is Chauncey Deion Sanders." And Deion was like, "Who? What?" Brought him up on stage, hugged him up. Well, Chauncey's a fantastic student who has worked with the Rams now and had an internship with the Seahawks. Right, so he's gotten into it. There's a ton of stories when you go there. People who are now working in the sports field in some realm who attended this. So that's the big thing, because a lot of people, when they have these career fairs, especially for the underserved communities, if you want to reference them that way, say, hey, we have to expose those people to employers. No. The thinking is you have to expose employers to these people, because oftentimes when jobs come open, like, we couldn't find any good female candidates, or we couldn't find any candidates of color. Well, those excuses are null and void, right? They're right here. You have this great opportunity, with the Black Sports Business Symposium, with the HBCU, the All-State HBCU Legacy Bowl in New Orleans, where they've got a massive career fair. Like, you're bringing the employers to the people so they don't have to shop around, right? Like, they're all right here. So there's no excuses for you to say you can't find a pipeline of talent. And that is the goal, to eliminate all excuses for not having your employment or your department or just your overall knowledge, your networking, sphere, clouded by saying, well, I don't know where to find people. Yeah, you do. They're right here.
Yeah. And, you mentioned, not being able to find women or black women. Your entire team and you guys' entire team at Black Sports Business Symposium is all women, all black women. Was that intentional, or was that something that just kind of came about because they were the best for the position?
Well, again, this is where I have to tip my hat to Greg Gibson, who does a lot of the legwork. I think some of it was intentional, but I think more so, and more so than them being incredibly qualified, my God, they're amazing, is they're the ones who stepped up. Mm-hmm. Like, they're the one. This is all volunteer work, right? This is no one's getting paid for this. So they're the ones who set aside time from their jobs at New Balance or their jobs with the Detroit Tigers or whatever to make this work. And that's where I cannot be more grateful. Yeah, okay, I'm listed as a co-founder, but again, I don't do much, right? I do what I can. These are the people who pour their heart and souls in it, and these are the people who deserve all of the credit, and I just can't thank them enough for taking the time for making this happen.
Mm-hmm. I think you said, you guys are really putting in the legwork, and Greg's doing a lot of the legwork, and things are certainly changing, right? You're seeing more athletes themselves step in front of the camera as analysts and being more of the face of certain networks. You can go on any network. I mean, ESPN some days has nothing but black faces on, right? When you look at TV, and there's a lot more of that changing. But what would you like to see continue to change, or what have you seen continue to change throughout your entire career as more and more black faces are showing up on camera?
Yeah, and I don't want to sound ungrateful when I say this, because I think it's great that a lot of these former athletes are, finding their own spaces, like, Ryan Clark and The Pivot, a fantastic podcast, some things he's doing there, or getting opportunities in the television world. But one thing I want to duly point out is a lot of these programmers at networks see black people through a straw, mm-hmm. in terms of, we have to get this former athlete on, when there's a lot of qualified, trained journalists, women, Latina, black, whatever, who aren't getting those opportunities. And again, it's not a jealousy thing. It's not something. It's just that let's pigeonhole this role for a former athlete. Oh yeah, maybe we can have a host, who's a person of color. But in terms of an insider, like tell me any major network or anyone like that, excuse the background noise, who's an insider, right? Jonathan Jones of CBS Sports, who does the NFL, was the first black insider in any sport by any network. A lot of people like to champion diversity. They like to champion it with former athletes, mm-hmm. right? Or pigeonhole them into host. But when it comes to national reporters, like I'm the chief national reporter of the NFL Network. I'm one of the very few at any network. Look at baseball. Look at Major League Soccer. All the things we were talking about, that we bring people in. Horse racing, golf, tennis. I mean, I'm not saying we have to have everything, but I'm saying that, if you've got Coco Gauff, if you've got Naomi Osaka and all these people playing tennis, well, okay, where are some of the announcers of color who weren't former athletes, so to speak? Where are some of the people in MLS? I'm not seeing a ton of, Latino announcers in MLS or black or Japanese. Why isn't there a Polynesian reporter or several doing stuff for the NFL or major college football when you're looking at such an influx of the Polynesian community playing these sports? So again, I think it's great that we're seeing more people of color as a whole on the roll, in the television broadcast realm. But I think it's again, the majority of people doing the color don't look like any of us. So that's why it's easy to say, let's get this former athlete in this role. Let's get this woman of color in this host role. But in terms of making them insiders or national reporters or breaking news people, we're still not gonna let them in that lane.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I mean, you're a pioneer for that, right? Like you said, you're one of few.
I'm not a pioneer. I'm in that role. The Michael Wilbons. There's so many people who came before me.
Yeah,
I will never consider myself a pioneer, but thank you I get what you're saying.
Well, I mean, for me, you are. I came up and I'm looking at you and Wilbon and a lot of other people that came before me. of why I wanted to get into sports, right? I was an athlete as well, but, I was looking at people that looked like me that were doing it, and, you mentioned boxing. My uncle was Larry Holmes. So I watched him on the sports realm, but when it came to being a sports journalist, I didn't have that foresight, right?
I know your uncle well. I covered a lot of his fights.
And like I said, I grew up training next to him, right? So I knew what it took to be great at my sport. Ultimately didn't obviously pan out where I'm not in the NFL right now, but when you see that, you can be it. And for me, like I said, you were part of that, as well as a lot of other people that, you definitely looked up to as well. And like I said, a lot of these things that are happening in sports, the black issues that people want to politicize these days or anything else, you were credited with the Colin Kaepernick story and releasing that story, as well as, Michael Jordan of the Wizards and, things with Michael Vick. So you were credited with those things. Kind of give us a peek behind the curtain of breaking a story and what that meant for you to be a part of something that was so monumental in the sports world.
Yeah, look, a lot of it's timing. I'm not going to sit here and say I did anything, brilliantly investigative or anything like that. I just happened to be there when Colin Kaepernick did not stand for the national anthem at that third preseason game against the Packers. At the same time, albeit coincidence, had I not been there, nobody may have noticed. There were a whole lot of other people there who had the opportunity to do it, and I'm fortunate that I was able to have the perspective to write a story. Whereas, I kind of broke a journalism rule, which is always, you want to be the who or the what. Well, I wrote about the why. Okay, everyone says, oh, Colin Kaepernick, did stand for the national anthem. Well, I focus more on the why, right? Because he was protesting police brutality, some of the loopholes in the judicial system that kept people of color, imprisoned or made it easy for them to be imprisoned. So, that's what I decided to kind of hit on, because I had understood where he was coming from. I followed his social media all summer. It was 2016. It's when, Alt Sterling got killed down in Baton Rouge by a police officer, when Philando Castile got shot in St. Paul, Minnesota by a police officer. So all of these things were happening in front of us, and it was very politically timely and socially timely. Like, this is why this is a big deal. But most of the people focused on the act. Some of the other bigger stories, the whole Michael Jordan coming to work for the Washington Wizards and be head of their basketball operation before he came back to play, that took some pretty intense finessing. It's one of the prouder reporting things I've done in terms of how I broke that story. But every broken story, a lot of times they just fall into your lap for reporters. A lot of times it's a hunch, it's curiosity. You're doing some snooping, like I did with the Michael Jordan thing. But a lot of times it's just being there, having the understanding of why it's important and how to actually convey that. Because it was a written story, even though it was NFL Network, the Kaepernick thing was a written story. The Michael Jordan thing was a written story. The Michael Vick coverage for more than a year was a written story. And that's where I would always encourage young people who do what I do to know how to write. Because you might not have a camera there, but you can crank out, pictures with words and tell a story with vocabulary and verbiage that really put things in perspective and put meaning behind it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and now everybody has a camera, right? There's a camera in your pocket at all times. Your phone is always right there. And now so many people have a voice, right? Social networking and social media has given literally everyone a voice. But one of the top people that are getting those voices, and not just in the realm of, athletes becoming analysts, are student athletes and NIL. And a lot of these things are changing, where these athletes are now a brand at 17, 18 years old, and the landscape of sports is changing. How have you seen, from your vantage point, how the landscape of sports has changed with these athletes as you're covering them a lot closer than a lot of other people are, not college-wise, but pro? How have you seen that, the kind of the transition of sports over the last couple of years as NIL is being introduced in college, and these athletes are now going from the college ranks into the pros?
Yeah, look, I haven't seen, a significant change yet. I think it will come as we get 10 years into this. But, a lot of people think, okay, these athletes are coming to the NFL or the NBA or whatever completely spoiled because they've had all this money. They've been able to be on the covers of magazines. They've been able to have their own podcast. Well, I hate to tell folks this, but these cats have been getting paid for a long time, even before it was legal. Now, maybe they didn't have the ability to have their own podcast or go do commercials for a car dealership or for a soda company or something like that. But a lot of this stuff's been going on. Now there's kind of the curmudgeonly crowd, the boomers to get off my yard guys. Like, these guys are coming in spoiled. Their expectations are what they are. It's a lot of it has always been this way, man. You talk, when I covered the NBA, there's coaches like AAU is ruining stuff, not college basketball, because in AAU, all these guys have been fighting over these kids since they're 13 years old. They've been taking care of their parents and making sure that these kids have rides to these trips, to Memphis and then to LA and things like this. So I think in some ways it could be damaging because, when you're seeing the recruiting going on, kids aren't going to where they're going to get education or where they're going to feel most comfortable on campus. They're going to where they might be able to get the biggest paycheck. But let's also keep in mind, the majority of these kids aren't going to be making the type of money that, some of these guys getting paid $1.5 million a year are. That's only a handful of guys on a 90-man collegiate football roster. So, it's, again, I'm interested to see where this is going to go in a couple years, but in the short term, the only thing, it's just mind-blowing. I covered the Polynesian Bowl last year, which it's a high school all-star game in Hawaii, and there were 5 millionaires on the field. I'm like, what? Like, the money is real. Like, these guys are doing this, but it changes the way guys, and from the student perspective, it changes why these coaches have to coach. Mm-hmm. Hey, man, you got to be more of a salesman than ever. You're not selling your program. You got to sell your donors to cough up money to these kids. And that's a whole new world. So, again, it's going to settle in a few years. And hopefully some of these young people and their parents who are receiving this money get some financial literacy behind them as well to understand there's great things they can do with this money besides buy a car, buy a house, or hang out with their buddies. There's a lot of positive things they can do.
So I started off this conversation talking about the Knox tour that you guys get to do with the Hall of Fame. Oh, and man, you're also involved in the HBCU Hall of Fame, which I believe you were just at last week. What's it mean to you to be a part of both of those, and what type of honors you get to kind of bestow on people as the co-MC of the HBCU Hall of Fame, as well as this Knox tour that we're getting able to see up close and personal, where these guys are being bestowed these incredible honors of being inducted in the NFL Hall of Fame?
It means everything. That means everything to me to be a part of that, because the Pro Football Hall of Fame, think about this, okay? There's probably been 40, 50,000 people who've played or coached at the professional level. There are less than 380 people in the Pro Football Hall of Fame. That is the rarest of air. And for me to be a part of the NFL Network's coverage and actually part of some things that happen with the Pro Football Hall of Fame for, I'd say, the past at least 7 or 8 years, if not longer, it just means everything to see people's lives change. You've had these great careers, but like when Randy Moss went in and he looks over at the wide receivers, he sees Jerry Rice, he sees Andre Reed, he sees Tim Brown. He's like, do I really belong here? It's just an amazing thing. And then the past couple of years, when the Hall has allowed current Hall of Famers to knock on the door to inform the incoming class, it means just as much to those guys wearing the gold jacket as it does to the people being surprised by that news. And that emotional connection, because those guys are going to be forever teammates, is incredible. And now there are 35, if not 36, people who are Black College Football Hall of Famers. And for those who don't understand the Black College Football Hall of Fame, it is for players, coaches, and contributors who went to or dealt with historically Black colleges and universities. It's not Black players from any college. It is from schools like Grambling and Southern and Delaware State and Florida A&M and South Carolina State. And so you have 35, 36 of those players in the Pro Football Hall of Fame. But then when you do the Black College Football Hall of Fame, it's really, really special because, HBCUs, they're not big schools. Most of them have probably fewer than 8,000 students, if that many. So there's always this tight connection just going to an HBCU. You don't have the money, the athletic facilities. You don't have, a lot of the things that are given to others. So when these guys get together and they are honored, it means the world to them. I mean, Lamar Parrish, the former Cincinnati Bengals great, 8-time Pro Bowler, got in this year after waiting a long time to get in. He was like, it means so much to him coming from tiny Lincoln University in Jefferson City, Missouri, to be recognized with some of the greats like the Deacon Joneses, like the Jackie Slaters, like the Walter Paytons who went to those schools, and knowing the intimate bond they share going to these black colleges, being able to just like emotionally connect with these guys somehow, like I said, it's everything. I've got the best job in the world covering the NFL and pro sports and living so many people's dreams. But to be part of those two halls of fame, as well as the Polynesian Football Hall of Fame, man, I just can't tell you that human connection, it hits the soul very, very hard each time we do something together.
Mm-hmm. So I talked about a couple different of the highlights, at least for me, when I look at some of the things that you've done. What's a story or a moment that has really kind of stood out for you throughout your long career, something that you really hang your hat on and say, that's where I knew I belonged on this stage, or that's a story that really showed me something, or just something that you always kind of harken back to?
Well, it's probably the most difficult part of my career for a lot of different reasons, and that'll be the Michael Vick, dogfighting investigation. Michael Vick is somebody who I had a very good relationship with. Michael did not, when he played with the Falcons, he did not like doing media. He did not trust much media. But him and I, for whatever reason, he wasn't overly forthcoming, but he felt a certain comfort level with me. So when he gets in trouble for fighting dogs, on that human level, I'm like, oh my gosh, what are we dealing with here, man? I had no idea, and who does this? This is horrible, when you found out some of the things. But then you also find out about humanity, right? Because the judgment, and I have no complaints about anybody who wants to judge Mike for what he did and what he was involved with. I mean, every day, I was working in Atlanta then, and it split the city in half. Families weren't talking to one another. It was racially polarizing. The city was burned to ash. It was nonstop conversation for 6-7 months. And it just, every day I went home just sick to my stomach, and I would wake up exhausted because of all of the emotions that went with it. Covering a very difficult story, covering a very difficult topic, having people on the radio who I was friends with absolutely kill our coverage because they thought we were either being racist or they thought we were being too aggressive against Mike. When all along we had sources where we were 100, when I say we, my partner, Orlando Ledbetter, who still covers the team, we had sources where we were 100% correct. We would not go with information that we knew was wrong, that other outlets were reporting, and we would take the condemnation for, well, why didn't you do this? They're saying it. Well, we didn't do it because it was wrong. And that was even within our own house at the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. Well, why aren't we pursuing this? Because it's wrong. Well, we need to do this. No, we don't, because you're going to be wrong. And so it just took so much out of me. And it took so much out of D. Orlando Ledbetter that, when everything kind of wrapped up, I don't know if we were ever the same. And then to see Michael Vick make such a transformation. I love that guy, right? I love who he has become, what he has become, what he stands for now, and the way he has reached back. Just the full circle part of it. It doesn't tell me, to your question, I belong on the stage or whatever. It tells me that as a messenger for the masses. Again, I talked about the fans are the lifeblood of sport. Well, the readers and the consumers of content are the lifeblood of my existence. and to have to provide them with information and perspective while also catching daily hell from them, it helped me become a much better man in so many different ways. And that's the career moment, and it was a long moment. Trust me, it was months. That really told me more than anything, there's nothing I can't handle when it comes to this journalism game and this human game.
So years later, you got to go back to the Falcons, I know, and write for them as well. What did that mean for you after, leaving there and being able to go back? And I think it was 2019, 2020, where you were able to, you wrote a column for them and everything else. What did that mean to you to be welcomed back like that?
Well, I mean, I've always had a great relationship with the organization. I mean, I've got great relationships with almost every organization, just in terms of they respect me because I think I'm a very fair reporter who I'm not about myself. I'm about providing information to the public. And that deal you're talking about, for 2 seasons, they were gracious enough to allow me to be the analyst on their preseason football games. And so that was something I had not done. And they guinea pigged me. Yeah, Steve, you can do this. You could completely suck. You could be horrible. But we're going to give you the opportunity to fail on our platform. And then I would, like you said, I would write a column periodically about that, but about the Falcons. But, just them giving me the opportunity, because a lot of people do it. A lot of people in our business will call preseason games and then come back to NFL Network or ESPN or CBS or whomever, Fox, whomever. And for them to allow me to do it as a non-former player, which is even bigger because the only non-former player doing analysis on the NFL is Charles Davis, the great Charles Davis, my co-MC at the Black College Football Hall of Fame. He's the only non-football player doing it. And so for them to allow me to do that, I'm incredibly grateful to that organization. And they will tell you point blank, I don't give them any favors. I will be as critical as I have to be because that's just who I am. And I think that's why they respect me. Because I don't try to sugarcoat stuff when everybody knows it's wrong.
Mm-hmm. So this has been an amazing conversation. I can't thank you enough. Before I let you go, I always love to end with just a piece of advice, right? Something that you may have learned during your career path that you can either pass on to the next generation coming, or maybe it's a journalist that's years in the making of already doing this. Maybe I'm speaking for myself a little bit, but what's a piece of advice, something that you've learned throughout your career that you really feel kind of resonated with you, that you feel people should know?
Yeah, look, there's a saying that actually Kevin Demoff mentioned to me, and I think he read it somewhere. It says, comparison is the thief of joy. Why does this person have this when I've been working here longer? Why does that person get that opportunity when I've worked just as hard? You compare yourself to other people, you'll find yourself miserable. You'll find yourself overthinking. And there's never been a study that's shown people who overthink positive thoughts. They overthink negative thoughts. They think crisis. Get out of your own head. Worry about what you have to do. Treat people very well. Because relationships mean everything. Your mental health means everything. And if you're constantly comparing yourself to others with situations that you have no control over, you're going to be miserable. So comparison is the thief of joy. Handle your own, treat people well, and you will have inner peace, which, as I have lived this life, is short, but as long as I have, is just about everything to me.
That's amazing. Probably something I needed to hear myself, but I like I said, I really appreciate it. I think we're about 10 weeks out from the football season kicking off, where we'll be able to be, watching you basically watch you every single day. Now I think you're on TV just about every time I turn it on, and no matter what is it, NFL Game Day, where you'll be, all over different places, giving some different analysis. I know there's the Insiders, which is on, Monday through Friday,
yep, 7 p.m. Eastern time. They got a great crew on that show.
Yeah, I watch that all the time. So it's a great crew. So like I said, I appreciate it. I can't thank you enough for coming on and kind of sharing your wisdom, talking about your career. Like I've given you tons of flowers when it comes to Black Sports Business because I love it. Hopefully I get a chance to go back again next season. But no, I really appreciate it. Thank you a lot for coming on and talking.
Ryan, keep doing your thing, man, and thank you for having me on. I really appreciate you.